Commissioner Alexander?
Present.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Here.
Mahoney?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were
Palachek?
Oh, that's called teamwork, isn't it?
Palachek?
here.
Commissioner Elwell?
I am here.
All right. Chairman Shotwell?
Here.
7.
Any public comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we're going to postpone the Region 2 Planning Commission item until the speaker arrives. Economic and Workforce Development Committee update. Scott Rogers.
Good morning.
Morning, Tim. I'm sorry.
We're going to work together on this, I think, Kent and I,
Starting with the computer.
starting with the computer, exactly. As you know, probably within the last 6 months or so ago, Kent and I were asked to reinvigorate the economic development and workforce strand of Jackson 2020 and try to get that process up and running. So we've spent several of those months kind of going through our organizational process, I guess. What we thought we would do is share with you some of that background, what has happened in our first and second meeting now, and where we see ourselves going in the next couple months. And please feel free to interrupt us because this is kind of a work in progress. What we actually did was first look at the citizen priorities. You know, this is part of what Adam's worked on, economic development being number one, which has really dictated a lot of where your resources have been put. One of the challenges, and Adam and I have talked about this when it comes to that economic development being the first priority, is the first thing I asked Adam is, how's that defined? And Adam said it's really self-definition by the respondents. And that's kind of it's a challenge for us in that it could be anything from financing to land to infrastructure to sewer. And that's part of kind of where we went when we started getting our committee together. And even in the discussion with people when we asked them to be on the committee, and they said, well, what are we going to do? And what's our charge? And we said, that's going to kind of be up to us, because the definition of what this committee is supposed to achieve is really going to be driven by them. And that first conversation really has been quite interesting when we went through that. So the first thing we did was, with our members, was send out a survey. I'm quickly run through the members that we have on board right now. It's a very good mix of business, community leaders, government leaders, a good geographic disbursement around the county. We wanted to make sure that we had more rural areas, urban areas, planners, bankers, business people, so that we had everybody's perspective at the table. Yeah, Julie.
Thank you. Is Linda Bryan still serving?
No,
or is Nancy
no,
Lewis?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank
Because
you.
we've changed, because Linda retired and she came on in the middle of that process. So we actually did an online survey, and frankly, I think we had informed all of you of that survey, and we're going to ask you to participate in that a little bit later on. But the results that came back to us were very somewhat general in nature. I think some of them were driven out of the first conversation we had. Both Mike and Adam participated in that first meeting to help kind of set some of the framework about how we got there. But I'm not going to go through them all. But I will probably, I think the important thing to point out is, what you're going to see in the responses is the responses are all over the board. It's not specific, like we need to have more free land, or we need to do more low-cost financing. They're bigger picture type issues which all fit together. And frankly, to me, it's part of the refreshing part of the conversation. Some of those same conversations are the same conversations Julie and I hear when we're on Cradle to Career. That crossover is really important, that people understand that there's a broad definition of economic development and how one person's piece fits with the other person or organization's piece. And so you read through this, you'll see that regionalism is really important. For me, that's particularly important because that defines market area. While we're most concerned about Jackson, our workforce is bigger than Jackson, so thinking regionally becomes really important. How people view us externally, they view us as a region, not necessarily as the city of Jackson or the county of Jackson. Workforce preparation of our youth, that's huge. You guys have heard me talk about this many, many, many times when it comes to the business needs that we have in this community, especially from a skilled workforce standpoint and how we're connecting with youth. So that was a theme that came out of the survey. You'll love that one on the top of that list, roads, roads, roads. Almost every respondent emphasized infrastructure in some way, but roads was always on almost every one of those lists. And that's important whether you're a resident, whether you're a business, whether you're a visitor, whether you're just traveling through. And the fun thing about that conversation, I guess the challenging thing about it was everybody knew that was an issue, but then, okay, what are you going to do about it? And that's bigger than you, it's bigger than this committee, it's obviously bigger than the State House right now. So, but having that conversation, I think, is extremely important. And as we went through this list, I think what everybody realized is they know about this much on every one of those subjects, that in order to address them or to become more involved in them or to impact them, we need more depth of knowledge on all these areas. Some people in the room had a lot of depth on their particular area of expertise. Some people had very, very little. And as we talk through this, I think you'll see where we're going to go with this will help everybody. And I refer to Julie a lot because we're in Cradle to Career together. But I think this group's almost where Cradle to Career was 18 months ago. We're a little bit behind the curve, but we're approaching economic development from much the same perspective as that group is approaching education. This began the conversation about what do you want to know more about, and really it goes back to the list of things they thought that were important. How do we become more educated on these subject areas before we delve into what's a solution or how do we impact a solution? And I think, and Kent, you certainly can jump in here, the tendency is to create a plan and we're going to create strategies and then we're going to go accomplish something. And this group has kind of taken a step back and saying, how do these pieces interact together? Which pieces can we potentially impact outcomes for? And then what is our role as a committee, if you will, in trying to achieve some outcomes in those areas? Those are big questions with no probably definable answer until we get a little further down the road.
I think one of the things we realized because of that very early on is the committee needs to engage in a self-education process where each one of the representatives will spend a few minutes talking to the committee about economic development, workforce development from their unique perspective and experience. We think that has value so that we become engaged on an educated level, on a fact-based level, as opposed to assumptions that are often used to make decisions.
And so actually our next meeting is next Wednesday, and with Monica's help from the Community Foundation and Ishwar's help from the library, we're going to go through a system scan of all the people in the room. I should tell you that the city's been very engaged in this process. Both Pat and Jonathan have participated, and a lot of good interchange and a lot of good, when I say interchange, I also mean not just talking but listening, and I think that's really important. One of the challenges I think we've had sometimes is, what are they doing and what are we doing, and do those things cross over? The last meeting we had, I think there was a lot of good conversation about the city, the county, the EG, the private sector. How do we approach these things together? So I think that was pretty refreshing.
And I think that the thing that dawned on us is maybe one of the primary roles of this committee will be education of the public about the issues. Somebody says, well, let's replace 9 miles of Page Avenue, but they haven't got a clue what that costs. So I think that educating the public might end up being one of our strategies.
And I think the roads one is a good example. I mean, you all know because you deal with it all the time. How are roads rated? and how long are they supposed to last, and how do you prioritize how you're going to fix them with a limited number of budget resources. Even this committee doesn't understand that. They don't understand the specifics of how the road department goes through and rates roads, and how long was that road's actual life supposed to be, and then you look at all the roads that are there and how you're ever going to prioritize which one you're going to rebuild 10 miles of. So I think this committee has given itself the permission of, let's make sure we learn about the subject matters before we start tackling tactics and create unrealistic expectations. And in my position, I think that's extremely good, because you can run forward and say, one of the things on the list was, what's the best practices for financing? Well, that's great for financing, but if you don't have resources to capitalize a revolving loan fund, then having best practices for financing really doesn't make a difference. So we have to kind of set the stage for that. So where we're going to go, we're doing system scan this next meeting. Hopefully it won't take more than 1 or 2 meetings. Then we're going to prioritize what are some of those issues that we feel like we really can impact and or influence. Because I'm going to use the education side as an example. When we've been really focused on workforce skills and manufacturing skills, and the state merit curriculum has a huge impact on how much skills training you can do at the high school level. In order to change some of that, the business community, this was a couple weeks ago, sat down with superintendents, principals, counselors, and said to them, what do we need to do to help make your job easier, especially at the Career Center level, so maybe those students that are really good with Career Center type curriculum can spend more hours doing that and not necessarily take Algebra 2 or trigonometry, because they don't need that for that $80,000 a year job. And that group said, together, look around the room, we have a lot more influence than if we went by ourselves. And educators said, well, the merit curriculum's not what we need. Well, based on what? So I think this group has said, what are those things going to be where, as a group, we have a lot more strength in not only educating the public, but maybe also influencing outcomes. For you to be able to get more road dollars, is it going to be better to have business people, regional planners, economic development groups be on your team when you're going to Lansing and saying, we need more strategies, we need more flexibility. For me, I will tell you, we had site selectors in town last week, from 9 site selectors from across the United States visiting our region. They spent time in Ann Arbor, they spent time down in Monroe County, they spent time here, and Amy told me of 3 different conversations where they said, boy, your roads are... So they were on a bus, right? And so they spent time going around our region. So it wasn't just Jackson, but they all commented about how bad the roads were in Michigan. Now, if that's what they take away from their 3 days here, that's not a good thing. Doesn't mean it's the only thing they took away, but it means something that we have to address. So I think this group has said, how can we help impact those things that we need to change now? They've talked a lot about land assembly. They've talked a lot about infrastructure, the sewer issues that we have, and how we're going to serve infrastructure into the future, how are we going to pay for it. So I'm pretty excited. I think this group has a lot of potential to really start to pick off 1 or 2 things that they can look at in the big picture and help people like the county commissioners say, how are we going to influence change in this over the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years? And I don't know, do you want to finish up with that in the survey?
Yeah, we would like to engage in a very brief conversation about the same questions that we've posed to ourselves as a committee, and then I'm going to ask that you maybe think about it a little bit more and commit it to this very brief survey, get it back to Delane, and ultimately back to us. So the very first question, and I would like to open it up, what economic and or workforce development issues are important to you, because it is your process, your strategic process that we're engaged in. So what is it that's most important to this body, either individually or collectively? Bill?
It isn't business development, but then again it is. Truck drivers are getting hard to find. I'm hearing there's going to be a 1 million driver shortage in 2 years nationwide. combination of things, the federal regulations, the state insurance requirements, and really a poor attitude. People don't want to work.
Just a general shortage
Yes.
of,
I will tell you, Phil, the number one thing in the roundtable, and the business leaders of Michigan actually hosted these 9 people for lunch, number one point of conversation was workforce skills, people shortage, soft skills, just showing up for work. And not just here. I mean, these people were Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago. Everybody has the same challenge, so how do we distinguish ourselves in addressing those things is really going to be key. And it might be truck drivers or it might be tool and die makers. Truck drivers by far are the most across the board open positions in the country. And they all have little different state regulations, but if you're an over-the-road driver, you have a lot of federal regulations as well.
We operate under the same regulations, but we are told by the federal government how our economy is really doing well, and I don't know what we're going to do when it does do well, because
That's, I think, was another good point the group brought up, is what is the barometer we're going to set over the next 5, 10, 15 years to measure whether we're pushing things forward? And we had a lot of discussion about unemployment, which is really kind of a false number because the number changes depending on how many people are actually in the workforce or have quit or are getting out or whatever. And median family income was one of those things that says if we can move that bar, which is hard to move, but that's probably the most important bar for education, for housing, for increased assessments. So I think we're going to actually have a lot of discussion around that as well. And like I said, that's a hard bar to move. But in our world, so do I want to focus on companies that hire $25 machine and tool and die makers or $11 an hour warehouse people? Everybody needs a job, but if you have limited resources, how are we going to move that median income bar is really important. And I think finding a barometer, and we haven't settled on anything, but finding a couple things like that is really important for us to, whoever sits there over the next 10 years can say, are we moving that? Or can we influence that?
well, the truck driver shortage is going to be inflationary. If I need a driver, I'm going to have to go hire one from somebody else.
Right.
And
And that's happening in a lot of jobs right now.
Julie.
thank you.
In looking at this question, the first thing that comes to mind is simply career readiness. And in dealing with the way you would proceed, I would just strongly encourage your group, which I already know the answer, that you are, to work with existing organizations. Your list was very impressive, the diversity of the individuals serving. I see representation from South Central Michigan Works, board members, consortium members. I see the Cradle to Career Initiative, and as an individual who values existing groups and not having to reinvent the wheel, I think a lot of these issues are being addressed elsewhere as well.
I've had the privilege of working with a school district in the attempt to create an internship at my shoe store. School districts and other people involved need to take all job opportunities seriously, whether it's one little one or 25 or 30. I'm over 30 days into the process on the paperwork. It's very difficult to get responses out of the school district because it's one job, okay? It's an entry-level job. This is where we teach young people to show up at work on time, how to dress properly, how to introduce themselves to customers, how to be involved. I realize that it's just a little retail business, but we've had the privilege of employing many people who are now leaders in Jackson County. And I'm not referring to myself. There's been other people that have gone through the process. We need to come up with a way to let us introduce young people to the work environment. And it's becoming more and more difficult. We now have to pay them $8.15 an hour. Everyone says, well, no one deserves minimum wage. Well, when you're 16 and $8.15 an hour is really pretty good for 20 hours a week. That's quite a bit of money. And it's something that somebody's got to look at to help solve this problem. I'm not creating full-time jobs. You know, we rotate people through it 4 to 6 years. They go from us to community college to full college to legitimate jobs in the community and careers, and it's just very frustrating to try to work because, oh, you're only one job, you can wait. Oh, you're only one job, you can wait. Or you're too small a business. And it's very frustrating. And I just think you need to get a handle on that to have a better understanding of what the jobs are out there. There's a lot of jobs that go wanting because people just don't want to go through the effort anymore.
Agreed.
I know Steve Wellman is retired now, but he ran laboratory services for Consumers Energy, and he would go to the college and ask for someone that had a basic math background. And he had technical jobs that, although they involved a lot of training, would pay, with overtime, $80,000 the first year with a 2-year degree. And he was always hiring from out of town because there weren't people here that had that math background. I think that's a broad statement, but there was a disconnect, and this happened over years. Right.
I'm talking about teaching.
Right.
Handle,
Okay.
so I'm talking.
All right.
This is a-
Understood. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things I noticed, especially in Jackson County, and I'm sure everybody else sees it, you can't turn a corner without seeing a sign where they say they're hiring. I don't care if it's home improvement, retail, you name it. Everybody wants to hire, but they can't get anybody to take the jobs. The current Speedway that opened up over there on Wisner Street over there, they could not get enough employees there, so they had to do an open interview throughout Jackson County just to try to get enough employees. So there's a multitude of jobs out there for minimum wage, but they're not having people standing in line for them. That's number one. Number two, I talked to a senior citizen during while I was campaigning, and she works at one of these places, and she told me that the competitive market right now for some of these jobs is between the senior citizens and the young people who do want a job, because senior citizens also need jobs now because they have to supplement their income because of insurance costs and everything. So this isn't just a matter of young people getting a job. This is a matter of senior citizens wanting jobs too, because they need to survive because they can't survive on their income. So now you've got senior citizens and young people competing against each other. And quite frankly, just one more thing, most of these employers would rather have the senior citizens because they do a better job.
That's reassuring for me. Thanks.
I probably going to kick some school people in the face, but or education in Lansing. It appears there's too much trying to direct high school graduates to college. They're not all. They're all maybe not college material. We still need a lot of people with technical knowledge that is usable. If you take a high school graduate and put them in a retail store and unplug the cash register, they're in trouble. So there's some skills, and it's, I think that cradle to career thing needs to get after the people in Lansing that are trying to set educational goals, because rather than trying to teach these kids how to pass a test, they're missing a lot of life skills. When I was about the last several years I was with Treasury, we were told we had to hire some University of Michigan graduates, and the ones we hired passed the CPA exam on the first try, but it took us over a year to train them how to do audits, because they were taught to pass the CPA test. They weren't taught any common sense, logical things that auditors need to know. There's a disconnect there. My wife as a nurse her whole life. And the last 5 years before she retired, most of the nurses would rather sit in the break room rather than be in the operating room. It would drive you nuts. I guess there's a disconnect between the work ethic and which Carl just said, the senior citizens work harder than the new graduates, but they need to have some practical education rather than passing the test. So.
Okay, other comments, General?
Well, plus, going, kind of piggybacking on what Dave said, I think we need to look in the future and see what jobs are going to be created in the future, what professions. I started off very early in my life as a printer, and there's really no demand for printing the way there used to be because people home computers and printers at home. So, I look at that, and no offense, but, newspaper writers, there's just some professions that are going to go away.
John, that's a really good point. One of the things that we had this meeting with the school board members a couple weeks ago, and we brought them some information about careers of the future and skill needs of those careers. And through 2020 in the state of Michigan and across the United States, the majority of job openings are going to be middle skilled jobs, which means some education after high school, but not necessarily 4-year degrees of education. Now that might be apprenticeship, or that might be an associate's degree, or that might be a valuable credential, but that's the piece that we have tended not to focus on, which I think is part of what Dave was saying as far as and we have this discussion at Cradle to Career all the time, that merit curriculum is focused on the basis of 4-year degrees, not the basis of middle skilled jobs. And we're having the conversation, but changing that direction is going to be a challenge, frankly, because we have to live within the boundary of what the state kind of sets. And we have this discussion at Cradle to Career all the time, but that is really important, and for people to recognize that over 50%, I think it's like 50.1% or something, of those job openings in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be middle skilled jobs.
And some of those machinery jobs pay quite well.
Oh, yeah, very well. And IT jobs, they're not just manufacturing jobs.
And I've talked with manufacturers that say they're constrained on business growth by the fact they can't hire people. They don't need more space, they just need more workers. So,
The problem, as I see it, is it's too easy to live without working. It just isn't worth getting up and going in if you've got a cell phone and you've got a cable TV. Yeah, big screen.
that one might be a tough one for the committee.
Yeah.
But I do think this conversation's important because in a lot of communities and economic developers have been guilty of this. Success has been based on what did you bring new to town, right? Where's the new factory? Where's the new distribution center? And I can tell you to a person from the JAMA manufacturers, which is 250 people, if I tell them I want them to invest in the enterprise group so that we can go out and attract new companies, they won't give me a penny. Because they're exactly in that situation right now, Phil, where they have to rob from somebody else, pay an extra 15 or 20 cents an hour, bid up the price of labor to get somebody from somebody. And so they don't want any more competition for the labor market. And for us to, say in the next 10 years or 15 years, how are we going to grow the pie bigger? We've got to solve this workforce issue. We absolutely have to. Because to grow the tax base bigger, we're going to need more new investment, not only from outside people, but from internal people, just like Kent said. And if we don't have people that can make the product, there's no reason to build a bigger building.
Anything else? I think we're at the limits of our time. I'm going to distribute this survey, and you can ask answer those other questions on it, please. Dave?
One of your next questions is infrastructure. I get daily stuff from an outfit called Ag Daily, and they just had the one that came last week said corn prices in the Dakotas are probably going to drop below $2 this year because the crop is so big and the railroads have been abandoned, so everything has to be hauled out by truck, and you can't haul it out fast enough by truck. So infrastructure, whether it's rail or roads, is extremely important.
Okay, our next steps, we have established a regular meeting schedule. We're going to discuss the internal survey results and your input. We're going to try to incorporate, where we can, the work of the past strategic planning committee, and try to use social media, although I'm going to rely on other people for that, to help, if we do get to an education component of the public, try to utilize that as best we can. So
please take
Dave's
a
good.
moment to comment, and I will get you that regular schedule. So it's usually, I believe it's the second Wednesday at 4 o'clock at the EG office, 3:30 actually. So you're always welcome to come and participate if you'd like.
Dave?
I think one of the things any committee needs to do is make sure you look under every single rock, because if you start with a preconceived idea that A is the answer, and you look at two things and it says, well, A might be the answer, then you say, oh, A is the answer. So then you look, if you really look at it, well, maybe C is the answer.
Right. And we're cognizant that we want to work on things that we can impact, first of all. We want to add value to the infrastructure for economic development that's already there. We don't want to duplicate, just want to add value when we can. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, Mr. Duke, the speaker has not arrived? Okay. Moving on, we'll move on to Riverwalk parcel cleanup, staff report and agreement. I believe that's you, Mr. Brown? Or is it Rick? Rick?
This has obviously been a long time coming, trying to work through the challenges of this site, and what's complicated about it is that one owner's property sits on top of another. The property goes vertical and horizontal, so. But we have been working with Allegiance to finally clear this up, and we're ready to proceed to closing. However, there's a couple things that need to be resolved before that, and you'll see them in your board packet next Monday, on Monday. So I'm using this map, it's in board docs, you can see it, and we'll be referring to these parcels here to describe what's going on. Over on, the first thing that needs to happen is a part of the agreement is a revocable easement, and that is up on this section of the property, in the top corner. What the easement is, that before the split, Allegiance Health had their garbage dumpster on that property, which was ours, and I don't know when or how long it went back that way, but they put it there at some point, and weren't happy that they had to move it when we did the deconstruction of the hotel. So, and then after that, we asked them not to put it back there. We are, in working with them though, have agreed to allow the dumpster to there. They're going to put up a decorative fence around it, something that's nice and attractive to shield it from the roadway. But it's a revocable easement in that if and when we sell the property, because that's our intent right now, that we would revoke that easement and pull the dumpster off, and they would have to put it on their property somewhere. So we've, in good faith, both the parties have argued to that point, but it's ultimately up to you to approve that as part of the agreement. The future development rights is the second piece of it. The agreement states that the county's intent is to market and sell that property. In doing that, we didn't want it to become unusable, so we asked for and were granted 12 parking spaces in Allegiance's garage in return for, so that that property doesn't get closed off. Otherwise, the only access to that property is the mechanic. So with some dedicated parking spots, it leaves some options open for a developer if they wanted to put some type of condos in there or some type of development that they've got dedicated parking for it. So Allegiance has agreed to that also. And then the conveyance of parcels, like I said, these parcels are on top of one another and it gets very messy. The city has asked that these be cleaned up, and there's actually 3 parties at play here. There's not just Jackson County, but there's Allegiance South and then the state of Michigan. So let me try to explain what's going on. Because the property lines were not distinguished by the actual structure, we ended up with 2 cavities in the building that are ours, but we really have no use to them. There's doors from the outside for them, but yet they're contiguous with Allegiance's space. We would like to give those pieces to Allegiance in exchange for some other things, but that's this cavity up here in the building. It's above the parking ramp, and it's this piece here, so it's parcel 3A and 3B in the diagram. And then also parcel 4 is the old lobby of the hotel, and our intent is to give that to Allegiance as it sits on top of their garage. Again, we really have no use for the top of that parking deck. You can't actually park on top of that because it's been compromised by felling a building on top of it. Now, what are we getting in return for that? Well, for one, the parking space is part of the return on that. And then parcel 2A, they've agreed to maintain that for us in minimal lawn maintenance after we've restored the site, until a developer comes in and develops that property. The other little quirk here is what's known as parcel D in lot 83. The county's property is known as lot 83, but parcel D is on the second page. The state of Michigan actually rebuilt the parking lot on top of the county's property, which is parcel D. Unknowingly, on their part, we talked with them, and there's 2 ways that we can give that property to the state. One is it takes an act of the legislature or a bill to do it, which would be very timely, or the state can receive property by gifting, and which would be much more quickly for us. This is only about 200 square feet of property in this parcel D. We're not looking for compensation. The state of Michigan was very generous to us in allowing us to use that parking space for the demolition. They basically shut that down for 4 or 5 months so that our excavator could work on that property from that side. So we're really not interested. It has no value to us. Like I said, they already built a parking lot on top of it unknowingly, and so there's 2 items. One is to approve the agreement with Allegiance. Second is to gift parcel D of lot 83 to the state of Michigan. So that, I think I've covered the main tenets of the agreement. Questions?
A lot of this makes sense, however, do the 12 dedicated parking spots hinder the redevelopment of the sector that we own? Is that enough?
It's a good question. The answer is I don't know what the right number of is. We thought, particularly in residential units, 12 was a safe number, but for business use, it's going to be difficult for that property being trapped on with only one access spot that's only wide enough for 1 lane of traffic. So even a business use would have to have access to that property through the garage, and that's a whole different story to get a frontage on the lot. And most of when we talk about developers, there's really not a possibility to connect it because of the old structure was there. The chances are, if it's going to be developed, it's going to be developed from the retaining wall back to the river, not over the garage. Because remember, this part of the garage actually is still above, the county's property is actually still above the garage, the second subfloor. So if the property is going to be developed, it's likely going to be developed from where the retaining wall is going to be back to the river or north to the river. There's still going to be a space between the southern part to the northern part of the garage.
I wonder if there should be put in here an option to lease some parking on the top level or something. Do they use everything? We don't want to limit our scope of what we can develop this as.
That's always possible in the future. They lease spaces right now, additional spaces. They claim they're full. I don't know that I've ever seen it full, but, I don't go over there and count spaces either, so I have to trust them on that. There's a lot of other organizations in that building than just the hospital, so. 12 was what we felt was a safe bet.
Adam, a couple of questions. Is the 12 parking space, well, you talked about a revocable
Easement.
thing on the, easement on the dumpster thing. It's not revocable on the parking, correct?
That's right.
And is our giving up this parcel 4 more for our benefit for liability or to consummate the deal with them? And is there any other use for that? Granted, if the building's been dropped on, it's been compromised, probably don't want to be driving on it, but are there other uses like footpaths or green space or not?
The parcel 4, which is at the top, it's what we're now calling the terrace, the former lobby of the hotel. It actually is, the pavement, the concrete is not thick enough to actually park on either. It's only 4 inches at that point, whereas the parking deck is, I believe, 6 inches. So it's not actually strong enough to even park on. It's really no more strong enough for then some type of pedestrian use or open space. And I believe that's Allegiance's intent, is not to try to build on it, but just to leave it open.
Yeah, that's what I took that as, but wouldn't we see that as a benefit to potentially offer some buyer that might buy the rest of the parcel there?
Well, the challenge would be is you'd have to connect it to whatever structure was built behind it. It is, your original comment, a point of liability, that we're really not interested in maintaining that, and also that it sits on top of their garage. We would continue this ownership of property where it goes not only horizontal but vertical.
Yeah, I found that kind of strange that we own the top and they own the bottom. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before in Michigan, but
Me neither.
it is unusual, you said, or not?
Well, I mean, you have condos that are ownership all the time in cities and in large buildings, but, certainly we haven't run across that in Jackson.
And we're confident that the title to that property would all back up that we own the top and they own the bottom, right? And that happened how? Through purchase from the old Sheraton? Is that how that came about?
Yeah, I believe it's when the hands changed with the hotel and with the parking deck, because if you recall, I believe the city had the parking deck at one time and sold that right to Allegiance, which made the hotel access inoperable, or unusable.
Yeah, that's the part that I found kind of strange, that we ended up with the Sheraton itself through taxes, but I didn't quite follow how that other property had been separated from that.
Yeah.
But
The other part I didn't mention now is we have to build a retaining wall on the northernmost part of the garage to add fill into it. Now, Allegiance, these other problems with these 2 cavities of space is that there's no stormwater drain on it. So right now, the water is literally collecting. We have to pump it off. And Allegiance has agreed to tie those cavities into their stormwater drains. Also, it's kind of a no man's space between the top part of the garage and the second subfloor. If we build a retaining wall there, it's going to create a pool, so they have to drain that part too. Now, they've agreed to drain both those two cavities and that space and tie it into the drain for the garage, which is where it previously was. And they've also agreed to waterproof the northern wall. We've said we'll clear it out, we'll cut it for you, but they've agreed to waterproof it, which is actually a significant cost. The reason they have to waterproof it is because that was all building there. It wasn't ever intended to be an external wall, so it wasn't built to be waterproof. So we're going to cut the pavement for them, but then they're going to pay the expenses for waterproofing, which is a significant amount.
Last question for me then, two-part. Parcel 2A, how wide is that narrowest part there, ballpark, if you know?
I think it's about 16 feet.
16 feet?
16, yeah.
Wow. And then is it like an acre left on parcel 2A then, or 2 acres?
I have that number. I can add that to staff report. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Allegiance actually did all the, paid for all the survey work and parcel work for us too.
Thanks, Adam. Obviously, all of us would like to see some type of development on this. There were many comments, which I won't go over. There's no reason to go backwards, but there were many comments made in regards to getting fair market value for this. The more I listen to you, though, it sounds like that may be difficult to do. When you talk about things like developing from the retaining wall, you talk about several other things that are currently going on. Again, it seems like it's difficult. It will be difficult to do. But again, separate from that, it certainly seems to me that obviously you've stated that there's going to be a decorative fence, there's going to be a place for a dumpster, there's going to be 12 parking spaces. Parcel 4A is something that's going to go from the county to Allegiance. We're going to give some of the lot to the state of Michigan. And okay, so you throw that all in, it seems to me like this is a way for Allegiance to get in and take some of the work that we were currently doing, and they will take it over in the responsibility, which will be less of a burden on us. Would that be fair to say?
That'd be fair to say from our point, and I think Rick Shealy, who's been involved with this too, would agree with that.
Okay, my last comment, and I'm sure there'll be some commissioners that agree with me, but it's not going to change my perspective one bit. I've felt all along from the beginning that this involved Allegiance being in the middle of this from the beginning. Others can disagree with me, but again, it's not going to change my mind. Thank you.
So Adam, on Monday, what happens with this on Monday?
So there's two things on Monday. There will be one, approval of the agreement between the County of Jackson and Allegiance, and the second one will be a gifting of the small piece of parcel D, Lot 83, to the state of Michigan. Personnel and Finance, yes, thank you. Anything else? It's good to see this progress on this, actually.
I have one comment. This piece of property, since the hotel has come down, has been difficult at best. A lot of players, a lot of moving parts, properties over top of properties. Every time it rains, literally, we have to have people who cost money go over and pump out these holes that we have to fill with water and so forth. Granted, the property is not very large for redevelopment and may not ever come about. We may be talking a few months down the road doing something different here, but at this point, that's been the goal, to create a property that at least potentially, legally, was clear and free of all the other entanglements, so at least we have an opportunity to promote it. Whether we can be successful is yet to be determined. But at this point, we really do need to kind of clear up these titles, clear up this ever ongoing cost and frankly liability, because some of the properties, as Adam alluded to, is over top of their garage. By transferring that property to Allegiance, they become responsible for the water that's filtering through or the crack. What if somebody accidentally drives on top of that thing for 4 inches? I mean, they could break it and break through. Well, if we own it, we really don't want to be a part of that conversation. So we're much better served to go ahead and move forward on these multiple agreements. I just know that Adam and Rick in particular, not to mention Allegiance's folks and attorneys on both sides, substantial investment there, have worked on this to get it done. So I just would encourage everybody to give it some considerable thought and move it forward. Okay, given our speaker is yet to arrive in regard to Region 2, let's move on to Rick, landfill. Rick is going to explain to the board, because this is coming up, committees, of course, and go to full board, the landfill situation that we own, those 2 closed landfills, and the need, the workload associated with that, and what the expectations are with the state permits that must be maintained, and of course how that impacts his department, and ultimately the request is for an FTE. Rick.
Good morning, everyone. To the folks on the BPW, I apologize. You're going to be hearing information that you already are aware of, but for everyone else, I'll do my best to keep everyone awake while I'm educating on a closed landfill and what goes along with it. The county owns a 123-acre closed landfill. It's comprised of 3 sections. Our biggest challenge is the original section, which was owned and operated by the city up until sometime in the 80s. It started back when you could pretty much put whatever you wanted to into a landfill. And since the landfill's been closed, what that means is a cover has been put over the top of the landfill. It's been covered with dirt and planted with grass seed. So we have a big grassy hill out on the corner of Dalton and Trumbull Road that we have to maintain. There's a series of requirements, reporting requirements by the State Department of Environmental Quality that we have to adhere to. The first one's a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and this is something that's handled in-house. It's a quarterly site inspection by a certified stormwater operator, and the employee training shall be implemented on an annual basis. And then we have to actually generate an annual review report and submit it to the DEQ on or before January 10th of each year. And the plan entails inspection of the entire grounds. Basically, they don't want any type of breach in that lining that covers the landfill to become damaged and allow stormwater running off the hill to pick up the stuff underneath it and wash it into the storm sewers or onto the ground itself. So that's one challenge that we deal with. Then we also have the City of Jackson use permit for wastewater discharge. And this is a legacy cost of when the landfill used to take their leachate, and I'll talk about leachate here in a minute, to the Jackson's wastewater treatment plant for treatment. Well, the state changed the requirements, and because of the contents in Section 1 of the landfill, we could no longer take our leachate there, and now it's, I'm not sure for how long. Again, this is something we just inherited when Veolia left, and we picked up the pieces. And now it's taken to Inkster. We've maintained our permit because I've talked to the city, and they are working on a plan so that in the future, and they made it sound like the near future, we would be able to start taking our leachate back to the wastewater treatment plant, which would be a huge savings for us just in terms of transportation costs. Or if we could finance it, we could install a sanitary sewer and flow the leachate directly to the wastewater treatment plant. The other option we have is maybe looking at Leone and taking our leachate there. Again, this is something I haven't looked at yet, but it's on the radar. Then we have the explosive gas monitoring program. This is an issue where landfills tend to generate methane gas. And if the methane gas collects in large amounts, it can present a serious hazard to humans. There's two sets of measurements that take place, one by staff on a regular basis and one by the sampling geologists that we use for testing our water on a quarterly basis. There's a series of 4 geoprobes along the fence line in 2 buildings on site that are checked quarterly. Then we have 8 secondary containment system manholes that are checked for methane every time we have staff on site. And what we're testing for, what we're checking for is methane, oxygen, and carbon monoxide levels. Again, this is all stuff that we have to record, we have to store the results forever and ever. Then you've heard me talk about leachate. Leachate's a product that is produced by rain, snow, some groundwater that percolates through the stuff inside the landfill and picks up little pieces of whatever it is that's inside the landfill and combines with the water and produces something called leachate. Basically, it's polluted stormwater. The way our landfills are set up, we have a series of containment tanks that the leachate flows into. And again, the tanks fill up. What we have to do is check the levels. We have to call in a tanker company. We have a series of pumps next to each tank. We hook up the hoses. We pump the stuff out, close it up, and get ready for the next event. The challenging part of this is the fact that it's all weather dependent. If we get a big snowfall, then it melts, we're going to produce a lot of leachate. If we have a lot of heavy rains, same thing, we're going to produce a lot of leachate. It's one of those things where it's hard to quantify. Maybe we could put in a series of some kind of radio transmitted signal telling us what the levels are in the tank to make it a little easier, but by the same token too, we have to do the grounds maintenance. We're out there anyways. And with leachate, it's really a challenge. I talked to the folks next door at McGill Road and how they handle theirs. They're set up differently than us. We have a series of 3 tanks on the property. With them, they flow all their leachate into one big tank, but they have a skeleton staff of only 5 folks out there, so they had to do something to make it so it would work for them. With us, I don't see where we could combine our tanks to be able to do that just by the way our landfill's set up. So then, of course, with this leachate, it has to be sampled. We sample it and generate semi-annual reports for the DEQ. We have to send that off. These are all results that are done by a certified lab. The sampling has to take place under sanitary as possible conditions. They don't want the test results to be contaminated by any outside element. Then quarterly, we do sampling for the city discharge permit. And again, this section of it is all performed by a certified laboratory. We do not do that in-house. Then the land, pardon me? That is correct. The geologist does that. They come out to the site, we meet them out there, we open up all the manholes and go from there. We use FTC&H. These are the folks that Veolia used. I did go out for quotes on that service. It'll be coming forth at some point here. And when I did the record-keeping portion of a landfill is really a study in how you can take record-keeping to the nth degree. We have a series of file cabinets filled with reports, results, everything else that has to be submitted to the state, has to be submitted to the city. And that's why when I went out for quotes for sampling, I also asked if they would give us a separate price on performing the overall maintenance on the landfill. And out of the 7 folks we sent our request for proposals to, they all declined on it. And the reason being, it's just too hard to quantify because it's so situational. It could have been possibly done on time and material, but yet no one bid on it. I thought I would explore that avenue though and see what we could do. So then we have the general maintenance of the landfill as well. And this is where the landfill operator inspects the fencing, the locks, the leachate pumps, the outbuildings. Oh yeah, we also have some lagoons there that used to be used for leachate to drain into, but now the tanks were installed, but yet the lagoons were never removed. I thought, oh, what's the big deal with the lagoons? But people have been found swimming in them. So I don't know when that happened. I was told it was a few years in the past. So again, when we're on site, we're always looking at the locks, we're looking at the fencing, and then just the condition on the landscape while on site. So again, any required maintenance is performed as needed. The other part of this, though, that's tough is the fact that we have, oh my gosh, almost 3/4 of a mile of roadways out there that have to be plowed. And this is so the tanker trucks can get in there. Again, all weather dependent. If we get a lot of snow, I could have a guy out there for 2 days trying to plow those paths out. And if we have another winter like we had last winter, it could take more. We did have a 10,000-gallon tanker slide off one of those paths, and it was pretty tough to get it back on. And then the other part of what I would assign the landfill operator is the record keeping. It takes on the average, and this is the advantage of having Lori Pelham while she was still with the county working out of my office, so I was able to get a real good feel of the time spent for record keeping. And it takes on average about 5 hours a week, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but that's the average. My office staff just doesn't have the time to do that, and it's not from anything other than we already have a really full docket. So that's my report on the landfills.
Rick, let's summarize, because there was a lot there. I just want to make sure that myself, as well as everyone else, has a clear understanding of this landfill and the expectation on the county. So what is it that we actually contract out currently?
The only thing that we contract out right now is the leachate hauling and the groundwater or the leachate sampling.
So a hauler comes in, when you say hauling, we're talking a person drives a big truck, tanker truck up the hill, and then our person has to be there to hook up the hoses and turn on the pumps and all that sort of stuff?
That is correct.
And describe some of those pumps for us.
Well, each one of these pumps is gasoline-powered. It sits right next to the manhole cover for the leachate tanks. It has to be maintained, and when it's 5 below zero, I mean, when the tanks have to be pumped, they have to be pumped. It doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees out or 5 below zero, and so you always have to have these these pumps ready to pump out those tanks.
As I can speak for myself, every time I go to start my 5 horsepower or something or another in the middle of winter, it doesn't want to start. Let alone the ones that are sitting out here, I can only imagine.
It just has a cover over the top of it, and that's it.
So, and then, so we have a contract for that, and then we have a contract with a firm to send a geologist out. Our guy comes out to meet them there, take the manhole cover. Is this a solid steel? What?
Yeah, these are regular manhole covers.
Okay, manhole cover, and then this person samples for the stuff, the water.
Takes the water samples.
Okay. And now we also have a contract with whatever, E-Course, what did you say, E-Course? Inkster.
For the leachate hauling.
No, for the, somebody's got to take that stuff.
Right, it's advanced recovery, there's another part of the name there, where they come in with a 10,000 gallon tanker truck.
So they're the same people.
Same folks.
Got it. Okay. All right.
They haul it all to Inkster.
Because, part of the challenge is that this isn't a full-time position, just for the landfill. And I say that with the caveat that unless it's raining or snowing or something, then it becomes, or unless there's problems, like the truck slides off, or it snows a lot and the guy has to go out there and, basically snowplow a quarter mile or what have you. Is that not amenable to a JDOT truck to snowplow that thing? Is it a road?
It's too narrow, I think, for one of their larger plow trucks, but because it's Dalton and Trumbull Road out in the middle of the sticks, we've had to ask JDOT to come out there and please plow to our gates so we can get the tanker truck in.
Okay.
And they have certainly helped with that.
Yeah, there's some new smaller ones coming in that probably be able to do it. I would think they could do it. Regardless, it's just one more, something that needs to be done. But again, the struggle is, Rick's asking for a full-time employee, and probably most of the time this isn't a full-time slot.
That is correct.
What would the person do otherwise?
Well, that's a really good question. And first, I understand and appreciate the cost involved in having a full-time employee added to staff. With the facilities department, we had, before I came here, 28 folks and 500,000 square feet of building and property to maintain. Now, we have 16 folks and over 1 million square feet of property to maintain. When we took on maintenance at the fairgrounds, we did not receive additional staffing. Their maintenance supervisor retired, he was not replaced. When we took on maintenance of Wesley Street and Shannon Road jails, there were 2 maintenance techs there, 1 retired, was not replaced. When we took on maintenance of JDOT, we did not add additional staff. So we're really busy.
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Elwell had a question.
Couple of questions. How frequently do they pump the leachate out, Rick? Maybe I missed that.
Oh, it's all weather dependent. It could be
Once a week?
It could be once a week. It could be 5 days a week. It just depends on how much snow we get, how much rain we get, and you have to go out there and stick the tanks, basically.
And then secondly, a question more for Mike maybe. Is there anything left in the funding from the resource recovery facility?
Yes, currently we have about 900,000 left.
Would that not be in a...
Well, the 900,000 has lots of uses. I mean, we're using it, obviously it's been funding this work that's been going on all this time, but it's also funding recycling, our recycling coordinator, educator position, it's funding that. Obviously it's finite, it will eventually be exhausted, and we'll have to find other means of funding it, if not general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was originally against hiring a FTE on this because I firmly believed it wasn't a full-time job. But that said, Rick has no place to draw from when it is a full-time job because his workforce has been reduced. And out of respect to Rick and trusting his judgment, I will support hiring a FTE. And I trust that if they're not full-time out there, you're going to find work for them someplace else.
Thank you.
I would concur with what Commissioner Duckham just said. If that individual needed to do other tasks, I have no doubt you'll find work for them. On the flip side, obviously what you're saying is you're talking to the city, which was used before. For that leachate could potentially go there as opposed to Inkster. You also mentioned Leone Township. Has there been any conversations with them?
I did not get that far yet.
Okay, I just think it'd be prudent to at least talk to them because they have a very efficient system there that works. If you've been out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. It works quite well. So, all right, thank you.
And it's certainly on my radar.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rick, when the leachate was going to the city, was it being trucked or was it going into the sewer? If you know?
It had to have been trucked.
Okay. And then,
There's no sanitary out there right now.
not far away though, right?
Correct. There currently isn't a connection. And one of the challenges with putting a connection in beyond the cost is the reason we're no longer with the city is because we had a violation. Our effluent or leachate was not acceptable or could not be treated at their facility. So they had to tell us no, had to take it somewhere else and pay more. If we hook a pipe up and we have that same problem, there is no easy fix. We'll have to put in what a lot of industry does, I don't know if Tim's still here, is pre-treatment programs. Literally, we'd have to put a pre-treatment facility on site to treat our leachate before we could send it, to the city sewer. So it's a problem.
I support Rick's request also. I think he does a great job and his people do a great job. Mike, is there money in the budget to do it?
Well, no. In all honesty, part of what's driving the request at this point is we've been using this guy casual employee, and he is getting to the point where he has so many hours in, he's going to hit the threshold of Obamacare, and suddenly we won't have any choice but to go back and take care of that. So it's what's driving it. We'd have to make it a budget adjustment, and of course, know full well this was it 51,000 roughly total cost, biddings and everything for this position. Will just that much more quickly eat away at our fund balance remaining, and therefore it's only a few years away before we need to figure out what we're going to do there as far as a fee or otherwise. So, but yes, there's currently money. As I understand it right now, we're on the hook for it all.
So the fact that the city exonerates them.
I can't define or definitively say that, but I believe that to be true.
I have not.
The city has no. They did prior to this.
No, the permits are totally in the county's name.
Yeah, correct. Well, permits.
If they were required at that point in time. And and I hate to go out on a limb on this, but I believe the state statute was enacted that gave responsibility of these municipal landfills completely to the counties, which I believe is what Kent's facing with your landfill out at the airport. The city's not involved in that, are they?
Sure. The DEQ determined that the city of Jackson was a I think the current term was the primary responsible party for the landfill. But in the same breath, they're not requiring anything be done by the city. And the reason we're dealing with it is because we're doing this project, the land. Some of this stuff rings familiar to me. So officially, they're the primary responsible party, although the county now has signed some type of a waiver of agreement of liability. So the DEQ is not requiring anything, but officially they are the responsible party for the former landfill because they operated it. I'm talking about the airport landfill.
Which was another city.
Right.
Same rules apply.
And that was because we were disturbing it or proposing to disturb it. That's why it came on the radar.
Yeah.
It was a closed landfill. It complied with all the requirements at that time. But then when we proposed our project, it then came to their attention.
I believe the answer is pretty clear. We haven't talked to the city about financial liability or explored that. Doesn't change the fact that we have to meet our responsibilities. Ultimately, though, I do think that we need to have that conversation with the city and, of course, attorneys and so forth. John?
Rick, you're using a casual person almost 30 hours a week now, is that my understanding?
It's a little more than that.
So if you hired a full-time employee, you would eliminate that casual position?
That is correct.
So it's not truly a full-time employee that you're looking for, it's just adding another 10 hours or so a week to somebody that you're already paying now?
Right.
And plus benefits. And how long have you been using this casual person?
Since December of 2013, when our contract with Veolia went away.
All right, thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd like to remind everybody here that this is a permanent forever thing we're having to do here until something changes with landfill technology. But with that said, in the expense of hauling, it would seem to me that the effluent had been delivered to the city treatment plant for many, many years. We had one bad load go in there. And with that said, I would like to see some kind of study or talks occur that if we actually piped this in to the city's plant, I'm thinking the volume of the different tanks may dilute this, quite likely dilute the bad product we had once, where it would make it possible to pipe it rather than
Truck it.
truck it. And then if it was also being piped, maybe we wouldn't have to keep monitoring it. They could just set it up where when it got so high, it would trigger a pump to pump it on out. We would take away the monitoring of the human factor out of it. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? If not, you'll see this on committee and then on to full board. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been told that Region 2 will have to postpone, will not be available today. With that, we'll move on to our budget discussion, I believe. Is that what's next? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
There's not a lot to update you on right now, but we did want to kind of give you an opportunity, as we promised last month, to speak towards priorities for putting together this budget. I attached a calendar this morning to the board doc so you could see what our time frame was. It's getting tight with not yet. Yeah, it's kind of here for just in case. We're coming up tight, one, with me handling negotiations for all the unions and Jim being very busy with implementation of BSNA. But nevertheless, we're looking at trying to put something in front of you in less than 2 months. I think it was December 5th is the date, or and then an adoption on December 16th. What we're doing here is just adding a year to the current budget. So we already have 15 budgeted, we're just adding 16. So the plan is to get a memo out later today to open up the portal in our financial system for department heads to put in any non-personnel expenses that they expect to incur in 16. So it's an estimate because this is a year and a half out for them to the start of 2016. So this will be a first shot at doing a 2-year rolling budget. But just a couple things that we're looking at. We are looking at the 911 fees, and that may be something that we bring before you for discussion in November about whether you feel like that's something we should increase. In our investigation of partnering with other counties for 911 opportunities, we realized that our fees are very low to fund, and we are supplementing our 911 operation much to a far greater extent than most of the counties around us or even in the state. We put in about 1.3 million. In fact, Mike, if you want to go over to push that on the laptop, we can show this slide. Revenue comparison for Jackson, Hillsdale, and Lenawee. Lenawee is roughly half the volume as Jackson. Hillsdale is about a quarter of the volume. And you can see they're able to fund their 911 operation without any general fund support from their county. We fund ours at $1.3 million. That if you look at the rates down here of what they're collecting on their surcharges, these are the surcharges, what's added to a home phone line and a cell phone line for 911 service. And you can see ours, we're at a quarter on the 911 surcharge that's recurring, and then 0.44. And I'll have to brush up on my memory of which fee is on which, but if and when we come before you with that type of proposal, we'll make sure we're able to explain exactly which charge goes where. But as you can see, one of the reasons they're able to totally fund their 911 program from the fees is because they're much higher than ours. I have done some research too on other counties, not just these 3 around us, but other counties. And there's 2 counties that have a millage. That's not something we are even contemplating. But the fees to add another quarter on somebody's phone bill might be a way to fully fund 911 operations without having general fund.
And
that would help us in our budget.
So how much are you saying we bring in total now on surcharge fees? And is it accurate that that doesn't go into the general fund or to dispatch right now, correct? It goes into a separate fund?
It goes into, let's see, where does that, some of it gets transferred into the general fund each year to pay for operations, so.
A small,
Is that right, Jim? It's probably, I think, around 600,000, actually, it should be right here.
but it's in excess of $1 million that's brought in every
Yeah,
year,
it's
right?
one,
Or closer
well,
to two?
actually, we can see it on that last slide, because our total operation is 2.4 million, and we are putting 1.3 million in general fund. So the difference there is coming from, outside of that training fees, is coming from the 911 stuff.
Right, but the point, though, is that there's still a substantial amount that stays in that's going into a segregated fund, correct?
Yes, and that's used for infrastructure right now. So these other entities we're talking about, they are able to fund that infrastructure. And I can't say to what level, what if they're, if it's adequate or inadequate, but they're able to fund their infrastructure, the cell towers, things like that, and the operations side of it. But
Thank you.
So that's really probably the only significant thing we're looking at on the revenue side of the equation. We forecasted last year, I think, around 1% growth for 2016. So that's the target we're looking at. But I do want to open up the discussion of, are there priorities that you think we haven't talked about that we need to be talking about in 2016. Knowing that this won't be your last shot at 2016, next year, this time we'll be talking about a 2016 and 2017 budget, so you'll have a chance to revise it. But right now, we are going on the plan that was adopted just 1 year ago, the strategic plan, in August of 2013, with these 5 internal service priorities and 2 external focus priorities. And so really, do you have any feedback, knowing that we're going to have another shot at this and knowing that we'll have at least a couple new faces on the board in January? What input would you have going into this budget for us? Of course, it doesn't have to be on the spot here. That's something, as we're putting it together, you can shoot emails to us, message us, talk about it, and we can discuss this again in November, as we'll have a better idea once we get all the department submissions in. So,
When we did the 2015 budget, staff talked about things we were going to accomplish in 2014. Have we gotten anywhere with the salary study, one, anywhere with the strategic plan with the fairgrounds and anything we're going to be doing down there?
I can speak to the salary study a little bit. The proposals are due today, and as of yet, we have not received, we hadn't received any as of yesterday that were legitimate, but we hope to get some in today and to move that forward in the next couple months. We've also been bargaining with that in mind with our unions. And you want to speak to the fair?
Sure. The fairgrounds, I have the second draft in my office of the RFQ, and we're preparing to issue it.
If that's it, just please message Mike and I with ideas and things that you come to mind for 2016, if you feel like we need to get it in there right now. So, otherwise, we'll be talking to you again in November about, we'll have a little bit better idea of where we're at. All the departments will have made their submission into the financial system.
Phil?
Yeah, I can think of one that's come up lately, an issue, and that'd be, seems like, reading the emails, we have maybe a shortage of IT people. I know the prosecutor had some problems, and we talked about doing something there, and I think maybe we ought to look at that when we're formulating next year's budget. You see if we should do contract labor to cover vacations, or if they truly need another person. But most of the efficiencies we've created in the last few years, and which allowed us to downsize the number of FTEs, has been because of computers, so we have to keep them running. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a valid observation.
I would concur with what Commissioner Duckham stated, that IT is a crucial piece of our operation and the success of everything from our law enforcement to our prosecuting attorney's office, our clerk deed obviously as well, but that is crucial, and that's got to be maintained as a priority.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. I do have one other quick question in regard to this, though, from the board's perspective. I mean, given that it's been a year since we looked at the strategic priorities, are we looking, is there any thought or feeling on the board they would want to have more of a full-blown look at that again? Or, because, that's not where Adam and I are. We were thinking that we did it a year ago. We're going to have a new board to some degree in the, January. And that this time, this next year, next summer, it would be 2 years since we had looked at it, and perhaps that's the time to look at it, before we enter into hardcore the budget process at that time. But we'll, obviously follow the lead of, county commissioners. John?
I agree. I think that we should take another look at the strategic priorities. I think that with some of the things that have changed and some of the feedback that we got after we did these, that maybe safe community needs to be moved up to our number one priority.
When you say you agree that we need to do it, you mean we need to do it now, or we need
No,
to
we
do
need
it
to
in
take a look at it.
next year?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you recall, we changed the way in which you receive those reports. Last year we did it all at once, the shock and awe approach. And this year we've done it one strand a month to try to make it more meaningful and more engaging and less sleep. So.
And of course, with that approach too, when we do engage, I assume it'd be next spring, roughly, would review all, in brief, and then go from there to any particular one that the board had a significant interest in pursuing a little deeper. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Brown.
I'm going to ask at this time, Commissioner Alexander has been serving on the SNARC Subcommittee program, which is the street naming ordinance, and they've been doing a lot of work. She had a presentation last month to the Board of Supervisors, and she's really up to speed on it, and I'm going to ask her to give us a quick update if she could, and then if commissioners have questions, she could take them back and get answers, or maybe she can answer them now. Please, Julie?
Thank you. I'd be happy to give an update, and I appreciate the smile out there on an individual's face in the audience when we said SNARC. Street Naming Address Review Committee has been meeting regularly. Since we've last spoke a few meetings ago, the SNARC, that committee has met 2 or 3 additional times. I now have in my possession the most recent copy by our chair. The chair of that committee is GIS Coordinator Scott Ames. I'm going to come to you sometime next week and share that updated version as well. It has been presented to the township supervisors as well for input with them, as Commissioner Shotwell stated. We continue to revise and edit, listen to the people out there making comments. One of our own commissioners here made several valid comments, clarification. It's really a critical and important policy that we have set for our county, and the importance being the safety, health, and welfare of our community being our priority. The more input we get to tweak and redefine this policy, I think the better we're at. So we continue to make progress. I will come to you next week and ask one last time for any information that you may want to share with me that I could take back to the committee as the committee is meeting again one more final time. I believe that's about our 8th visit, 8th meeting next Wednesday. So I will be getting in touch with you. I think the last thing I would like to point out is the credibility and the diversity on the Street Naming Address Review Committee. Amanda serves as our clerk deed. She serves on this committee. I represent the county commission. We have dispatch. We have JDOT. We have township supervisor represented, and as we move forward, any affected township would be included in that conversation. We have someone from the U.S. Postal System that serves, and as I mentioned earlier, the chair of this committee is our GIS coordinator. In the process of visiting this policy, we have brought several additional township people in who have actually had to deal and have personal experiences with naming, street naming, and incorrect addresses that need to be addressed. So we've been diligent, and Amanda, is there, I covered everyone on the committee, and so we continue to make progress. I would hope that this revised policy would be coming in front of this board most likely November to be revisited and maybe even possibly implemented come first of the year.
Thank you, Commissioner Alexander, and I really thank you for your effort on this. Being this board's representative on that committee has been very helpful. I know it's been a lot of work, and Amanda, you too. And the safety issue on this is very, very important. Commissioner Rice, you were appointed by this board to a regional organization for mental health. Can you give us a quick update on where you were at on that?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say to Commissioner Alexander, I too did have an opportunity, along with Chairman Shotwell, Commissioner Alwell, some other commissioners, to listen to the presentation at the Supervisors Association. And I concur with the chairman and Commissioner Alexander. They've put a lot of work into this, but the feedback from the townships and everybody is just it's extremely good feedback. So again, I appreciate that. As far as the appointment I had, I've attended one meeting so far. That meeting was in Lansing. This is the Substance Use Disorder Policy Committee. We will be meeting each month. We'll be going to different counties. Like I said, there's 21 counties in this Region 5 area. I can tell you that this new network, which was put together by the governor's office in the state of Michigan, is very challenging. We are currently working on the bylaws, and we are working on putting together the intergovernmental agreement between the 21 counties, which of course would include Jackson County. Our responsibility will be to, in essence, take a look at the counties and make sure that when it comes to substance use disorder, that the community mental health in each county are putting together treatment programs, prevention programs, and they're also putting together intervention programs that will actually and hopefully improve what we currently have. We are a recommendation board, but we do have oversight. For example, if we felt Lifeways was not serving our substance abusers in the appropriate way, we can let Lifeways know that it's not acceptable, and a lot of people don't know this. We could actually even let them know that their funding could be decreased to address this population of people if they don't adhere to the state criteria on what's best for people who need this type of treatment drastically. And again, I'm not doing it justice, but I do appreciate being on this, and I do appreciate the challenge. And again, I will do everything I can to make sure that Jackson County gets every dollar it can to serve people in our community that have a substance use disorder problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Any other commissioner comments? Public comment. Brad, any comment? No? Seeing none, I believe we've arrived at the end of the meeting, and I thank everyone for your attendance.